This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
It's our spring football preview next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Carter. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it. Get it. Touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast, which will heavily be reliant upon previewing spring football getting underway this week for the Wolverines. We'll get into that in depth with Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor and Wolverine Digest coming up in the next segment of this week's show. But I want to begin with this. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Really fun, at times dominant regular season. And it comes down at the end to a road game at your arch rival, which is essentially the conference championship game. And you roll in there confident. Even at halftime, you're like, hey, been shaky at times, but I kind of think we're in pretty good shape. And by the end of the game, you just feel like you got Jimmy kicked with a steel-toed boot. Does that sound familiar? Some of you might be like, well, Steve, that kind of sounds like the Michigan-Ohio State football game. And some of you with more recency bias might be like, that sounds like last week in East Lansing. To both of you, I would respond, yes. I don't know how many of us realize it, but our beloved football and basketball teams essentially just played the exact same regular season. Heck, do you know what the point spread was in Columbus in November? Michigan was favored by 4. You know what the point spread was in East Lansing last week? Michigan State was favored by 4. It was the same point spread in both games. The two games were basically identical. I mean, hey, go back to the first half against Ohio State. We get blitzkrieged at the beginning. You're thinking, oh boy. But at the end of the half, we're only down by 6, right? We get the ball back. You're thinking, hey, we weathered the storm. I think we're okay. Then you look at what happened in East Lansing. We get off to the great start and then foul trouble. And we're playing a half where Eli Brooks plays almost as many minutes as Iggy Brasdeikis. And then, though, we got no points from Isaiah Livers. John Teskey had a combined 2 points, 1 rebound in the first half. And you're like, well, yeah, we're up by 6. I think we kind of weathered the storm. I think we're okay. We were pretty far from okay. So we really went through the exact same experience with both the football and the basketball teams. However, let me say this. Unlike at the end of the Ohio State game, and then a week later when you saw Ohio State didn't make the playoff and we weren't going to go to the Rose Bowl, and it kind of just felt like the season was over, especially when you're like, who wants to play Florida again? This is now the most meaningful time of the year in college basketball. And this is still very much a team that could be one of the final two playing on Monday night. They're top 20 in KenPom in both offensive and defensive efficiency at the end of the season. And if you go back to when Ken Pomeroy began his analytics in 2002, every team but one that won the NCAA tournament finished in the top 20 in both of those categories. I know it sounds odd because we've had these shooting droughts all year long, but our offensive efficiency is 18th in the country right now. That's substantially better than what it was a year ago. I mean, we were like 30th or 35th heading into the Big Ten tournament a year ago. So we have more combined quad 1 and 2 wins than any team in the country. We finished one game out of first place in the number 1 RPI league in the country. So this is a team that with the right draw, and that's where I'd be more concerned about the draw than the seed line. John Beeline's 100% correct about that. This isn't good, even though the regular seasons of football and basketball feel like they ended the same way. This is now where this is the most meaningful time of the year. I think Michigan got a more favorable draw in the Big Ten tournament than Michigan State did, despite Sparty being a number 1 seed. I think when you look at the assortment of matchups on the top half of the bracket, where you have a very talented Maryland team who's top 25 in both offensive and defensive efficiency, if they could just value the basketball more, that would have been a team that I think would have easily had one of the 4 buys in the league. And they have Wisconsin with Ethan Happ in the tenacious way they play defense and hook and hold, and fake charge and flop. But they do all those things really good. So those are difficult matchups. And I think you look at the bottom half of the bracket where Michigan is at, you are looking at playing an Iowa team that looks like it's trying to give up on its season actively. You're maybe going to play an Illinois team that has a couple of really good players. The other guys are kind of like, so. I love the way we match up against Purdue. So I think I would not be shocked at all if Michigan becomes the first team to three-peat at the Big Ten tournament. And then we have Selection Sunday. So, yes, it does feel like we got kicked in the Manleys hard again by our rival in a conference championship, de facto conference championship game like what we saw in November. But stay vigilant. This is what we play for. It's all about March. And if you look at Michigan's history in March Madness, 1989, a number 3 seed. Last game of the year, you get freaking punked by the Flying Illini in Chrysler on senior day. They go on and win the NCAA tournament. 1992, they were the 6th seed. That was the first year of the Fab Five. They got to the final game against Duke. 2013, they were a Jordan Morgan tip-in away from tying for the Big Ten title. It rolled around the rim and out. And Michigan went from tying for the Big Ten title to the 5th seed in the Big Ten tournament. They were knocked out on day 2 by the Badgers of Wisconsin. They're the number 4 seed in their region. They got to the final game last year. We were the number 3 seed. Remember, everybody wanted that number 2 seed and the spot in Detroit that Michigan State got. And you go back and watch our podcast last year. I said, hey, I'd rather be where we are with the draw we have with the 3 seed than the draw that Michigan State has with the 2. And I was proven right. So, Michigan hasn't been a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament since 1993, the second year of the Fab Five. They were the second number 1 seed from the Big Ten that year. Indiana was the first. 25 years ago was the last time Michigan was a number 1 seed. But if you look at it, since 1993, we've been to the Final Four, 2 different times since then, in 2013 and last year. So this is still a team that, if you look at every aspect of its profile, this is one of the 10 best teams in college basketball, and there is still the biggest prizes to play for. When we come back, we turn our attention to spring football. Stay tuned. Thank you to all of you that are supporting us here on Patreon. We get asked frequently, hey, what can we do to support what you guys are doing here at Michigan Podcast? And one of the best ways to do that is to support us with a very inexpensive nominal contribution at Patreon. And as you can see, throughout the course of the year for our Patreon supporters, we do give you exclusive content we don't offer anywhere else, just as a way of saying thank you. So to all of you that have supported us throughout the year at Patreon, thank you. Thank you in advance to those of you who are willing to sign up and do so in the future, and go blue. Back here on Michigan Podcast, and now we begin our spring practice preview. And joining us, our good friend from WTKA in Ann Arbor, as well as Wolverine Digest, Michael Spath. Welcome back to the show, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I don't know about you, but a little bit of sun and north of 40 degrees just completely warms the heart.
Indeed. I was driving with the window down yesterday, and the thermometer said it was only 42 degrees, but it felt like 72 after what it's been like around the Midwest for the last few months. So a welcome respite, no doubt. Well, let's get to some spring football talk. And I thought we might have some fun with this. You know, I used to play 20 questions with my kids when they were little. They loved the game. So I'm going to give you the 20 questions I published on Wolverine Digest this week that I think are the most important to answer during spring practice. We're going to go through these questions, and I'm going to give you what the question. You're going to predict for us what you think the answer may turn out to be. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
All right, here we go. Here's the first question. Is this really new offensive coordinator Josh Gaddis's offense, Michael?
Oh, man. I think it's a new offense. I think it's Josh Gaddis' offense. I think there's going to be certainly heavily influences by Jim Harbaugh, but I think that he has, over the years, maybe a little bit slower than fans want, but he has realized his weaknesses. He's gotten rid of Tim Drevno. He's changed defensive coordinators. He's looked at some of the things hard in the mirror and said, okay, I've got to change this. I think last year was a nadir point for him where he realized I've got to do something dramatically different with my offense. I'm going to cede some of the responsibility and hand it off to somebody else.
Okay, question number 2. As we play spring football 20 questions, and this is a follow-up really to number 1. Does this mean Jim Harbaugh is taking a more CEO college head coaching approach?
I don't know that he takes a complete CEO. I don't think the offense will be like the defense with Don Brown. But I think he just understands that he's not the one that dictates everything offensively. So I guess, yeah, maybe a little bit in that respect, he's more CEO. But I think he's more CEO in terms of, a Urban Meyer CEO than necessarily a Bobby Bowden. A Bobby Bowden who was walking on the sideline, completely checked out, didn't know what was going on, versus someone like Urban Meyer that was still involved in the decision-making, in the in-game decision-making, but not necessarily, it wasn't his offense and it wasn't his defense.
Question number 3 here on Michigan Podcast. What exactly does speed in space mean?
I have no utter clue what that means.
For those who are wondering why we're bringing this up, our new offensive coordinator, Josh Gaddis, this is his hashtag that he's made pretty popular amongst recruits and current players already. Hashtag speed in space. So what do we think it means?
I think it means that he's going to try to get his best players isolated in one-on-one matchups and take advantage of those one-on-one matchups, whether it means throwing more screens. I hope it means throwing more screens, to be honest with you, Steve, whether that's a breakout screen to a wide receiver, whether that's using the running back in that capacity. Jim Harbaugh's offenses have had a lot of things the last 4 years, but they have not utilized the screen game very much at all. So I'm hoping that's what speed in space means.
Next question in our spring game preview. Who replaces the leadership of Chase Winovich, Devin Bush, and Karan Higdon?
Well, I think on defense, the guys that I'd be looking to would be Josh Metellus at safety. I thought he really came a long way from where he was as a sophomore. And then, up front, I don't know if there's really anybody up front. I think they're all pretty young. Khalid Hudson at the Viper position. He's one of Michigan's returning senior starters. So those would be the two guys defensively. And then offensively, I mean, for the first time in a while, Michigan has a fifth-year senior starting quarterback. It's taken some time since we last saw that. I think Devin Gardner in 2014 was our last fifth-year senior starting quarterback. So I think he's a natural leader. I think Cesar Ruiz is a natural leader, and let's see which one of these wide receivers steps up into that role. It could be Donovan Peoples-Jones or it could be Nico Collins.
Chatting with Michael Spath here from WTKA and the Wolverine Digest on Michigan Podcast, playing 20 questions for our spring football preview. I think we're on question 5, I believe. Will the Wolverines...
That sounds right.
All right. Will the Wolverines speed up the tempo on offense when needed?
I mean, I guess it comes down to what type of coach Josh Gaddis is, but certainly that's something they have not had in their repertoire in the last couple of years, only when they have fallen well behind. I'm going to say optimistically, yes, but maybe optimistic and cautiously, yes.
Question 6. Is Shea Patterson ready to go from game manager to difference maker?
I think that entirely comes down to Jim Harbaugh. If you go back and watch some of those early games and the way that they used him rolling out both to his right and to his left and kind of allowing him the freedom to throw on the run and make plays, I think you saw a quarterback that kept on getting, every week more and more handcuffs and saying, well, don't do this, don't do that. I think they completely neutered Shea Patterson by the end of the year. So I think you've got to kind of understand that he's more of a Brett Favre gunslinger type than a manage the game Brian Greasy type. And for him to be at his best, I think you've got to turn him loose. And so, will they let him do that? Yeah, maybe they will as a fifth-year senior with the weapons he has. I'm hopeful.
All right, question number 7 for Michael Spath here. Is it truly a quarterback competition this spring?
No, I don't think so. I would like it to be. Because I'd really like to see at the very least Dylan McCaffrey and Joe Milton push Shea Patterson. But what Shea brings back, his experience, the situations he's been in, Joe Milton, a big arm, a lot of strength, but, the mental side catching up still and needs to work on that. If it is a competition, I really think the competition is between Dylan McCaffrey and Shea Patterson. But I would bet you that it's, I would bet about 90% that Shea Patterson is your opening day starter.
Number 8, among our 20 questions previewing the spring, can new position coach Sean Nua develop depth and competition along the defensive line? I think the front 4, especially as I evaluate the rest of the Big Ten, I think the Kwity Paye, Aiden Hutchinson, Carlo Kemp, and I'm forgetting a name there, but the front 4 Michigan can come up with is going to be one of the best starting defensive line units in the Big Ten. But there is absolutely openings for depth behind those guys. So how do you see that playing itself out?
Yeah, it makes me nervous, the depth. I mean, Michigan, the strength of this Michigan football team for really the duration of Harbaugh's career, and Greg Madison has been this incredible ability to roll 2 full defensive lines out there. And when you look at what they have on the second level, they've got a lot of question marks on the second level. Mike Dana comes in as a transfer from Central, and he's probably your most proven, backup defensive lineman right now. I think what you're going to see is later in games, I think the defensive line is going to wear down more, and so it's going to put a lot more pressure on the offense to be putting up points and the offense to finish teams off late in the game. So, does he develop it? No, I don't think he does. I don't think the second unit defensive line is anywhere close to what we've seen the last couple of years.
Josh Uche was the 4th member whose name escaped me, and how did I forget him? He only led the team in sacks last year. Question number 9. Right. Last year, the offensive line went from weakness to dependable. Is it ready to take the next step from dependable to dominant this year?
I would say yes if 2 things happen. One, John Runyon finds a more natural fit inside or just gets beat out, because I think we saw against Notre Dame, against Ohio State, and against Florida that when they faced those 3 teams with elite athletes on the edge, that John Runyon was not capable of handling that outside pass rush. So that's got to change. And then, really, I think what you need to see is someone like Onwenu, who's been serviceable, a big, strong guy, but has lacked stamina and has lacked some of the foot speed. I think if you're replacing Onwenu and you're replacing John Runyon because better guys can push returning starters out, then yes, I do think they take a big step forward.
Almost halfway there now. Question number 10, as we look ahead to spring football starting for Michigan this year. Will Michael Onwenu grab hold of his spot on the offensive line or open it up to competition?
Well, and that kind of goes right along. I know you didn't plan that on purpose, but I think there's a really good chance that he loses it, whether it's to Chuck Filiaga or more likely Steven Spinellis, a redshirt junior coming back. There's a lot of positive talk about Cesar Ruiz and Ben Bredesen and even Runyon, who I think, again, kind of showed himself to be a little bit still out of position, but he had an all Big Ten year. I think Onwenu is the one guy that I keep on hearing is there's going to be a strong battle for his spot. I don't think they've had anybody better. They haven't had enough competition inside the last couple of years. Frankly, I mean, it's time for that to change. They've been recruiting that way. Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that he loses his job.
Number 11. Will Don Brown develop a plan B, if you will, defensive package that doesn't rely so much on man coverage against upper echelon teams that can exploit it? I mean, if you watched the NFL Combine and you saw two Ohio State receivers run sub 4.4, both in the 2 in the 4.3s, and the other guy ran 4.41, that's the notoriously slow 40 time in Indianapolis. Why the hell do we think we were going to cover those guys man-to-man for 60 snaps? That made absolutely no sense whatsoever. But will we have a plan B this year? Will we see it in the spring?
No, I don't think we will. I think as much as we talk about Harbaugh stubbornness, I think Don Brown is more stubborn than Jim is. I think he's built his career in the platform that he's on, coaching University of Michigan. I think there's numbers when you look at the success of his defense the last couple of years that he's going to eventually evaluate and say, "Hey, we finished top 5 in defense each of my last 3 years."
Mm-hmm.
I think he's gonna say, "I've got a safety coming in, Daxton Hill, that is elite in terms of his speed. I've got a couple of faster cornerbacks. I've built my entire scheme is based off aggressiveness and man-to-man. I think this is the classic example of you can't teach an old dog new tricks." So, no, I don't think that Michigan's going to all of a sudden become a 40% zone team and know how to break it out when it matters the most.
Number 12, as we look ahead to spring football, is Andrew Stuber really the answer at right tackle? We saw him start the last few games of the year with Juwan Bushell-Beatty hurt. Did you see enough there, or does he have work to do in the spring?
I didn't see enough there. I mean, he really struggled against Ohio State. Chase Young kind of bullied him around, and a lot of the Shea Patterson in the third quarter, the interception, the running for his life was the result of Andrew Stuber being unable to block the pass rush off of his side. But he was a redshirt freshman. Those were his first couple starts. A lot of growth will take place. Clearly, they liked him, or they wouldn't have promoted him over James Hudson after the first couple of weeks. But yeah, the two tackle spots to me, should both be open competitions. You asked about quarterback earlier, but I would not be surprised if you had two new starters at the two tackle spots, and yet I would not be surprised if you had the same returning starters in Runyon and Andrew Stuber.
Number 13, looking ahead to spring football, can the Wolverines hold on to both Dylan McCaffrey and Joe Milton in the era of the transfer portal?
We had a discussion about that on our show on Tuesday, and I was on the impression, I've been saying no. I think Zach Shaw, my colleague at WTKA, kind of looked at it pretty well and said, he doesn't know that they will lose someone in 2019 because, both those guys would still have enough eligibility remaining. Joe Milton will be a redshirt freshman this year. Dylan McCaffrey will be a redshirt sophomore. So going into 2020, Milton would have, I think that's 3 years remaining, and McCaffrey would have 2 years remaining. I think at that point, whoever's the starter is the starter. Whoever is the backup is someone that leaves and goes. I could see it happening earlier than that, but I think at some point it definitely happens. There's no way that in whatever it is, 2021, 22, that you have both Dylan McCaffrey and Joe Milton on your roster.
Number 14. Will we finally get to see a healthy Luigi Villain at defensive end?
Oh, man. I certainly think Michigan fans are, they want to, and the coaches hope so. I don't know, because they don't ever release, the injury history. What's it been? Has it been something chronic? Has it been something just random? To miss his first couple of years with back-to-back injuries, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Carlos Brown. Carlos Brown was a super fast running back out of Georgia that was supposed to be the heir apparent to Mike Hart, the home run threat, and in little spurts here and there he looked really good, but he could not stay healthy either. And so you just always plan on him being banged up, similar to Brandon Minor. I think Luigi Belain, this is the year. If he's not healthy for the entire season, then I think you kind of have to just plan on him as someone, maybe Brian Monet-esque that is always banged up. So I'm not counting on it until I see it happen.
This is the second highest rated defensive end recruit of the Harbaugh era, other than Rashawn Gary. So, this guy has a lot of athletic potential. Let's get to question number 15 as we look ahead to spring football here on Michigan Podcast. Is Ambry Thomas ready to go from flashy athlete to productive and dependable player?
Boy, there's a lot of good unknowns with some of these questions, Steve, and I didn't see it in the time that he got in there. I think actually he, if I remember correctly, and I know it's a fact, I just don't know what the exact number is, he led the team in pass interference penalties in the defensive secondary, and he played probably 10% of the snaps that David Long and Lavert Hill played. I think he might have had 3 or 4 on the year, and that just showed a guy that was overwhelmed in the moment. And so is he ready to take the step? I guess it remains to be seen. The good news is that opposite Lavert Hill, you have a lot of competition between Ambry Thomas, Benjamin St. Juste, Vincent Gray, and Miles Sims. And that along with the defensive line has been one spot consistently over the course of Harbaugh's career, largely because of Mike Zorich, the position coach, where every year they've gotten the best out of those guys. So I'm confident with the group that they have that they will have a very good number 2 corner, but I'm not ready to say it's Ambry Thomas.
All right, 5 questions to go. Number 16. Will Christian Turner and or early enrollee Zach Charbonnet take command of the starting tailback job?
Yeah, I think one of them will. True Wilson's your only other returning tailback. And as much as we like True for what he can do as a blocker, and he ran hard, look, the scholarship guys are still going to get every opportunity. I know that they feel really good about Christian Turner. We saw some flashes in that game against Florida. If he doesn't step out of bounds by 1 inch, he has a 40-plus yard touchdown. I think Christian Turner's a better chance than Charbonnet, just because even though freshmen come in and perform, you don't see a lot of 1,000-yard running backs. So in order of who I think is the running back for Michigan, I would go Christian Turner 1, and then Zach Charbonnet and True Wilson 2A and 2B.
The more I look at Zach Charbonnet, and the more I hear him described, reminds me a lot, and even his body type reminds me a lot of Anthony Thomas when he came to Michigan.
Yep, I'm right there. And you know what? As a freshman in '97, Steve, you know this well. Anthony Thomas was not the number 1 back.
Nope.
But he was the number 2 guy. And in critical moments, a lot of times he was the guy in there. He played extensively against Iowa, against Ohio State, and so they trust him with a lot. And I could see that something similar with Charbonnet, where he's getting 500, 600 yards rushing this year, and maybe he's getting more and more opportunities as the season goes on. But guys hit the freshman wall, and you just can't. As much as freshmen play nowadays, I don't think you can ever just plan on that guy being your starter at a key position.
Number 17, looking ahead to spring football with Michael Spath, where does Hassan Haskins end up, do you think? I listen to Isaiah Hole's podcast all the time. Take a drink every time he props Hassan Haskins, okay? So he's got people telling him this guy is legit, because he mentions him constantly. So where does he end up, do you think?
He's going to get a chance at maybe a tailback. With his body type, he's not too far off from being a little bit of what Joshua Uche was this past year. Could it be an edge rusher, a guy that just goes in on those certain situations and adds some speed? I don't think he's a inside linebacker. I don't think he's a natural defensive end. He's certainly not a safety. I don't know, Steve. I guess I guess if you were asking, like you had to make a choice, I would say he's kind of like an H-back.
Well, along those same lines, that gets to question number 18. Where do you think Michael Barrett ends up?
I think Michael Barrett ends up as a Viper. When you look at that position, you have Khaleke Hudson, who is, has some of the best physical skills, physical speed and strength for his size on the team, and is an ideal Viper. And his backup is Jordan Glasgow, and I'm never going to discount one of the Glasgow brothers, but I think at that spot, we've seen it with Jabril Peppers, we've seen it with Khaleke Hudson. You need one of like the top 5 athletes on the team to play Viper, to play it well, and I think Michael Barrett, when you consider his athleticism and what we've seen in film and the numbers that he's put up, that just seems like the most natural spot for him.
The penultimate question as we look ahead to spring football getting underway for the Michigan Wolverines, you kind of just went there. Who gets switched to Viper to provide depth behind Khaleke Hudson? And I've let you answer the questions. Let me throw a name out here. Jalen Kelly Powell.
Yeah. I'm on the Hudson, Glasgow, Barrett chain. Among the safeties, I don't know. There's two Green brothers. We have no idea what either one of these guys play. We've never really seen them. It takes a special kind of body type to be able to go from safety to a bigger physical presence at that Viper spot. And so I'm sticking with Barrett.
Okay. Final question of my list of 20 questions that need to get answered this spring. If it truly is Gaddis's offense, how does speed and space utilize all those tight ends and a fullback like Ben Mason?
Well, I think you make Ben Mason a little bit of a Mike Allstott type, and you don't ask him just to be a pave the way type of guy. You in passing situations, you leave him in there and you create some opportunities for him to catch the ball in the backfield. I think Nick Eubanks needs to line up in the slot. I think Mustafa Muhammad needs to line up in the slot. I think you get rid of you certainly if I see more 3 tight end sets this year than I see 3 wide receiver looks this year, I'm going to lose my mind. But that's been pretty much a staple of the Jim Harbaugh era. But no, I think some of those guys kind of get a little bit their role lessons. But I would love to see Ben Mason, especially with the lack of depth at running back. I'd love to see him get a little bit of a chance to be more than just a battering ram and a guy that goes in short yard situations. Maybe he is a guy that can pick up. We saw him, leap a guy last year. We saw him what he can do when he catches the ball. Maybe he is a guy that can play a bigger role and get 5 to 8 touches per game for the Wolverines. So I think the tight ends get diminished some. I think the wide receivers get featured, and I think the running backs need to be featured in the passing game much more so than they have been so far.
Well, that's the list of my questions. Before I let you go, brother, did I not ask you about something that you have your eye on this spring?
Well, you know what? I had to think about it when you kept on saying the 20 questions for the spring, because I thought for sure you were going to ask about does Michigan beat Ohio State this year, which my early answer would be no. But no, I think you've covered all the bases. I think the interesting thing at wide receiver is what do you do with 5 guys that could all be starters? How do you make most use of Donovan Peoples-Jones, Nico Collins, Tariq Black, Ronnie Bell, Oliver Martin? Yeah, I guess my biggest question along with the Gaddis offense is how do you spread the ball around and yet at the same time maximize the very best players you have on that offense and the very best pass catchers you have on that offense? Because I would love to see, a lot of guys get the ball and them, but I think in order to do that, I don't want to do that. I should say I don't want to do that in doing that and sacrificing how good Donovan Peoples-Jones and Nico Collins are as big targets that can make a lot of plays for you.
Well, what you just articulated is why I told somebody who uses some of my college football picks to get down on the sports books like Bet Online. He asked me for a long shot Heisman pick And I said, Shea Patterson right now is plus 2,800, meaning for you put down, $1, you would win 2,800 if he wins the Heisman. Okay. And I said, I'd put it on him. And I said, no, and he knows me well enough to know I don't do homer picks when it comes to money. And the reason why I said so is they're bringing in this new offensive coordinator. I agree with you. I do think it's going to be his offense. They've got all these receivers. I think it's going to be an offense that looks a lot more like what Shea ran at Ole Miss. Early in the year, the schedule is soft. The toughest defenses, Michigan State, Notre Dame, and Ohio State, are all at the end of the year. And he's going to be on national television every single week. I think we're going to be shocked by what we see. I think you're going to see an offense much more similar to what Jake Rudock ran his last month at Michigan than what we've watched the last 3 years.
Well, when you look at this past season, and you and I are both frustrated by an inability to utilize those weapons on the outside. But when you look at what they had in Cron Higdon and in Ben Mason and in a strong offensive line that could run power and could run some outside zone, it makes sense that as the wide receivers were developing, that they focused and featured the running game more so than the passing game. But now when you look at it, I mean, without a proven number 1 or number 2 running back, and with what you have back, we've been waiting and for a 3,000-yard season. It happened once under Harbaugh with Jake Rudock in 2015. It's only happened once previously in Michigan football history with John Navarre in 2003. That is a pretty much like, a bare minimum nowadays in college football, guys throwing for 3,000 yards. So, I look at it and Shea Patterson should have 40 pass attempts a game. I don't think he had 40 pass attempts in a single game last year. That's pretty much the norm across college football. He should have 40 pass attempts, and he should be throwing for 250-plus yards every single game. And if he's not, then I'm going to be terribly disappointed in what this Josh Gaddis offense looks like.
Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor and Wolverine Digest, thanks for helping us preview spring football here on Michigan Podcast. Brother, go Blue. Take care.
My pleasure, guys. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. If you like what we do here, WolverineDigest.com is the website. We update it frequently with commentary. If you don't want to wait until Tuesday and when a new episode gets unveiled each week, keep updated each and every week at WolverineDigest.com. Both myself and Michael Spath from WTKA and Ann Arbor write commentary there each and every day. WolverineDigest.com. This week's Twitter poll, we asked you, will Michigan win its third straight Big Ten tournament? 77% of you said no. I think we're going to get to the finals. I think Maryland's going to win it, actually. Going to go off the grid a little bit. I think Maryland's going to value the basketball a little bit better. And those young pups are kind of coming of age. They've got just a force of nature there in the middle with Bruno Fernando. So I'm going to pick Maryland to win the Big Ten tournament and beat us, actually, in the finals on Sunday. Let's get to this week's question of the week. What makes you think Michigan can win the Big Ten tournament again? That is from Brad. Well, Brad, even though I like Maryland to win it, I think Michigan, it's the best defensive team in the tournament. Okay. And that's the kind of thing when you're looking at playing 3 games in a row and you're likely not going to shoot the ball great 3 games in a row, 3 nights in a row, and in a foreign arena to boot. That's the kind of thing that translates well to tournament play. The other reason Michigan is strong in tournament play the last few years is they've been able to put lineups on the floor that can create their own offense. And the reason why that matters is, again, in short turnarounds, you don't have a lot of scouting time. You're playing a myriad of different styles. The way you plan things out can't always work. You need to be able to create on the fly. And when I look for championship teams, I look for teams that can put 3 guys on the court that can create their own offense. And the Wolverines can do that, especially if we can get Charles Matthews back. So when you look at the fact defense travels, you look at the fact Michigan can put multiple guys on the court, as many as 3 or 4, depending on the lineup, that can get their own offense if things break down and we get short on the shot clock. And then the third reason why I think we have a very favorable draw. And then the fourth reason why is the head coach, John Beilein. If you look at among active coaches in college basketball, do you know who has the best March record against the spread? Who over coaches the point spread more than any other active coach in college basketball? That's right. It's Coach Beilein. So, you asked me for a reason. I just gave you 4. Now winning it 3 years in a row is a tall order, but I would not be surprised at all if the Wolverines pull it off. That being said, my official pick is Maryland beats Michigan. And the reason why I'm going to pick Maryland, number one, is I really think it's difficult to beat a team 3 times in the same season. Well, what do you think? You can let us know by following us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast or leaving comments right here for us on our YouTube page. If you are watching us on YouTube today, if you could give us a like and a subscribe, we would greatly appreciate that. If you're listening via podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, the podcast platform of your choice, if you could leave us a 5-star review, we would appreciate as many of those as we could possibly get. Thanks to all of you who have already done all of those things. And a special thanks to our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast, which help us to get the word out about this show each and every week. Let the madness of March begin. We will have a full bracket preview next week right here on Michigan Podcast. Until then, go Blue.